just let me know, and hopefully we should be good, because it says I'm transmitting, and I don't know, someone make a comment, let me know. Are you there? People out there? Can you hear me? Dave to the UAE, are you there? Tell me you're there and working. Hello? Hello, hello. I'm having a quick look on the feed. It seems to think that we're working. It seems to think that we're working. I think we might be. Yes, there are comments. I'm live. Fabulous. Thank you very much, Sanjay. Thank you for letting me know. There we go. Perfect. Well, that was a testing little bit of moment there for me, wasn't it? Of all the lives I've done, that's the first time it's flashed up and gone, you're not live, which really confused me, and then I realised my internet had died. So I'm incredibly sorry about that, but hopefully we'll be able to crack on now and get on with talking about the things that I'm going to cover today, which is going to be far more of a practical session rather than looking at presentations and listening to me talk and asking questions. Today is going to be instead me demonstrating some macro photography and talking you through some of the principles of macro photography, of macro lighting. We'll talk about macro lenses, all of that kind of stuff. And obviously I will be answering your questions as well. So let me give you a little tour of what we've got here. So I'm going to show you down here, we've got some flowers. We're in my kitchen. In case anyone was wondering, we've got some flowers. I've got a light here. There's a camera here, which you can sort of see that way here. And then if you look from the other side, possibly a better view. So here is, this is where I can check your questions, make sure I can see them, but this is going to give you a different view of what's going on. You notice over here I've got some light modifiers, kind of a large one and a small one. And in fact, there's a couple kind of roughly fallen on the floor down there as well. So there we go. That's pretty much the setup. And to make sure that you can see everything, I will also show you my computer screen, so you will be able to see what's going on when I start shooting. I'll be able to give you a live view of what's happening. I'll also be able to show you the pictures as I'm taking them. So that's the plan. Now let's get back here. If I dip over that way, guys and girls, it's just because I am changing the camera angle to give you a better view, okay? So if I suddenly appear in this shot in a rather strange way. As I said, we are talking macro today. It's all macro photography. You've seen the flowers that I've got, lovely big bunch of flowers. Side note to all the gentlemen out there, if you want to win brownie points with your other half, go buy flowers for her and then just steal a couple of them and use them for photography. Always goes down very well. Women love receiving flowers. So don't tell my other half that's what I've done. I think she might be able to hear me, but I'm hoping not. Maybe she won't watch this later. So I've got some flowers, and it's, as I say, all about macro. So macro at its heart is all to do with the lens. Okay, now photography as a whole obviously is all about light, but macro is down to the lens that you're using. And there are a variety of lenses that say that they're macro when they're not. Now that can be confusing for sure. What you really need to look out for is that true macro is 1:1 or life size. So if something is 1 centimeter in real life, it will be 1 centimeter across on the sensor or the film plane. Okay? If it's not 1:1, it's not true macro. That doesn't mean you should stay away from it, far from it. It's just not going to give you the maximum magnification of life size. Beyond that, there are some specialist lenses that will give you bigger than life size. We start getting towards microscopes, but Canon, for example, make a lens called the MPE65, which will give you up to 5 times life size. And if I can find it here we go. I have got some extension tubes, that's these things, and an extender. And I am going to talk to you about these as well a little bit later on. So I'll show you what these can do. So an extension tube basically doesn't have any optics in it. See this? It's just a metal tube that moves the lens away from the sensor or film plane and therefore allows you to focus closer. If you can focus closer, you can get a bit more magnification. So I'll demonstrate this in a little bit. But the lens that I'm going to be using predominantly, I don't know if you can see this here. Let me take the lens hood off it so that it doesn't look quite so big and unwieldy. This lens here, this is a 100mm macro lens, and that's a fairly standard kind of focal length for macro photography. You tend to find them being anything between about 60mm and 180mm, with kind of 90 or 100mm is the standard. And that gives a reasonable working distance. It will work for a wide variety of subjects. It's pretty good for insects. It obviously works for flowers. The difference really obviously is, as with any longer lens, the longer the lens, the narrower the field of view, so the less you're going to see in the background, which is why if you really wanted to do insect type photography, a 180mm or a 150mm can be a benefit. It allows you to get that magnification while being further back from your subject. So, I don't know, butterflies, for example, if they're a bit flighty, then having a longer lens gives you that ability to get them without getting so close that you spook them. Flowers, fortunately, don't worry about that. They don't get upset when you're getting close to them. So we can get away with a shorter lens like a 100mm or even a 50 or 60mm type lens. Okay, let me just check and see if there are any questions. There are no questions there, but there's a lot of you there saying hello, so thank you very much for joining us. Welcome. Do remember you can ask questions at any time and I will do my best to answer them. Something you've always wanted to know, you just fire away. So the way today is going to work is I'm going to live shoot. Now, you'll probably think that this is all entirely set up and I know exactly what I'm going to get, but I don't like doing that when I do a live. I would much rather it was genuinely live, because that way you'll see some of the perils and pitfalls that might happen or that can happen when you're doing stuff. And I mean, you're learning that we can do this in a very small space, but also you'll see what can go wrong. I'm hoping nothing will go wrong, but you know, you never know, something might. So I've got some backgrounds, some things I'm going to use as backgrounds. I've got some things that I might use as reflectors. As I say, we've got some lighting, and that's where I really want to start. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut to the camera that shows you the flower here, and we're going to start talking about light, because I keep saying in photography that you do, and you really need to learn to see light and understand what it looks like and where good light comes from, what good light looks like. Okay, if you can't do that, then you're always fighting an uphill battle. So we're going to start with the light, and to demonstrate it, rather than demonstrate it with still pictures, I'm going to try and demonstrate it live. So I've got a continuous LED panel. Now, yes, I've got an LED panel here and I've got some flash guns in big softboxes behind me. Don't worry about that. You can do very good macro photography just with lights that you'll find at home. Angle poise lamps, for example. You know, a desk lamp can be made to give beautiful light. You just have to think about where it's coming from. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move this camera out of the way. We're going to go to this camera and I'm going to actually set this up because I want to be able to show you this in two different angles. So we're going to concentrate on this little flower here, this one at the back, which is quite a lovely flower head. So I just need to get this camera into position as if I was going to photograph it, or at least somewhere close to how I may wish to photograph it. There we go, something like that will do. Okay, let's get some focus on here. Brilliant, and that means that when I come over here and hit live view shooting on this, look at that, there we go. So now, first off, I'm going to show you it here with this light. So I am going to take my LED panel, you see this is very bright, and I'm going to move it around the subject, okay? Now you can see what that's doing from that angle up there. But what does that actually look like in terms of the picture as you might see it from the camera's perspective? So what I'm going to do if I give you now this view, it's entirely black, okay? Or it's almost entirely black. And that's very deliberate, because I don't want any of the ambient light in this scene getting into the shot and confusing what the light looks like. So now I take my light once more, and I'm just going to move this gently over the flower in nice and close so that you can see how the light sculpts around that flower head. Okay? And this is something you should do. It's great to do with all sorts of subjects, is to take a light, put it in nice and close, and just see how it affects the, oh, bumping into the flower there, how it affects the look of the picture. Okay? So you know what I'm doing. So you can see this. Here we go. I've got the light. In fact, I'll show you this here. I've got the light. I'm just wrapping it around and finding where the light looks nice. Now with a continuous light, this is really easy because it allows me to see exactly where the shadows and highlights are falling. So I can see whether the shadows are too deep and whether I may want to put a reflector in. I can see whether, you know, if I take a front light here and fire this straight in, it's going to look like that, which might be quite nice, but actually I might equally like something like this over the top, which is going to be a much more interesting ethereal look. Or perhaps, if I can get in here without bumping the tripod, if I bring it round from behind and create something really different. Now it's dark, it's probably a bit underexposed, but with a flash I can get a bit more light out than I can from a continuous panel. And that could give me quite an interesting look to the picture. So step one should always be you look at the light that you're trying to create. Don't just get your subject and fire up your camera and start shooting. Really look at the light, really try and figure out what light it is you want to create and how you want that to look, and then go from there. So we started with one bit of light. I'm actually just going to turn my tripod away a little bit and recompose so that I've got a bit of space. Now, we're starting with light, okay? Light is the basis of everything. But we need to have a think about what the background might look like, okay? Now, we could use a white wall. You could see that I had a white wall back there. Or we could put a background in, or we could put some material in. But I can just reach back here, and I'm going to show you this here. If you've got an A4 or an A3 photo printer, why not take the time to have a little look through your library and pick out some pictures that have some nice colour in them. Now, you may not have pictures that just have nice, simple colours. Doesn't matter. This picture was actually a bit of the sky of a Dubai skyline picture that I took. The sky was beautiful, it was a lovely dusk, and I just cropped a section out. Now, it doesn't really matter what the resolution is because this is going to be out of focus, and all we need is the colour. So you can pick sections out of images. If you do have a lot of detail in a picture, for example, this one, this didn't have a lot of detail, but some. This was sea and shore, and there were some ripples in the waves. I just took the picture, I opened it in my editing software, and I ran a blur on it, a Gaussian blur. So I made it all super fuzzy and ended up with this lovely gradient that gives me a multitude of colours to work with as my background. So I actually think, I don't know, we could, does anyone have any thoughts about what background might work? Do you think this Dubai skyline might be quite a good one, or do we want something a little bit more clashy? That might be this one here, maybe. No, I think that's probably a bit too clashy. We could just go with a straight blue, but I think that's probably too similar, and it's going to get lost. Okay, I think we're going to stick with this Dubai skyline. I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to get rid of the other two, put them over there behind me, and then a little bit of blue tack. I am just going to take these, and I think we'll have purple fading down to pink. And I'm going to put this just stuck up on the wall in the background. Now, this is going to be out of focus. And it's going to be out of focus for a couple of reasons. And the main reason it's going to be out of focus is because it's quite a way, relatively, I didn't put that up very straight at all, relatively quite a way behind the subject, and I'm in very close to the subject. And obviously the shallower your depth of field is caused, or your shallow depth of field is caused by getting in very close to your subject. Yes, aperture, as I've said before, will affect your depth of field, but it's also controlled by how near or far you are from your subject. So in macro shooting, you're in really very close to your subject, and you end up with that very, very shallow depth of field, okay? So I'm not worried about that being in focus or not. I would like to make it straighter because my OCD is going to be unhappy at being slightly wonky and slightly off angle. So let me do that now. Here we go. There we go. Right, perfect. Now we have a nice background. Now, in terms of what we're actually going to focus on, what we're going to photograph, the more you look at a subject, the more pictures you see that you might want to photograph. So I'm sitting here looking at this, and I thought I was going to go with that flower to begin with, but actually I really quite like, there's a little bud here if I can show you. There's a really lovely bud here, and I might actually focus on the bud instead. Right, we've had some questions. Lena, hello Lena, thank you for coming back. Welcome back. So your question is, what type of lens am I using? This is a macro lens, so this is a Canon 100mm macro lens. Sigma makes some really good macro lenses, as do Tamron, as do Nikon. It's the 100mm version, and it is specifically a macro lens, so it's allowing me to get that close focus and the extra magnification. As I said at the start, it's allowing me to get that 1:1 magnification or life-size imaging. Okay, so let me come in here. You can probably still see me from the side there. Oh, that's quite nice as well. Goodness, the more you look at this, the more you see. There's so much interest and intrigue when you start looking at things in detail. Right, let's bring ourselves back. I've gone and got myself in way too close. Okay, a little bit more. Now, obviously, when you're doing macro, it's all about tiny little movements because you've got so much magnification that just the merest little adjustment can make a really, really big difference. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this continuous light because I don't think that's going to be bright enough to begin with. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to maneuver you guys over here. That's where I see your questions. And I'm going to bring in this light here. Now this is just, this is one speed light. I don't know if you can see this. So let me put it up here so you can see what's going on. This is one single speed light. And it is, I'm just going to make sure the others are turned off. It's in a speed light modifier. Now, we can talk about light intensity, but we also need to look about the light shape and the quality of the light. And that's driven by the size of the light source. So if you have a large light source, you get soft light. If you have a small light source, you get harder light. So I'm going to begin with this light here. And it is, if I spin it round, if I show you the front of it here you go. It's got a grid on it, which is going to help stop light spill. It's quite considerably larger than that rosebud, and it's also substantially bigger than just a flash on its own. Okay, so the whole point of this contraption is to make the light bigger. It makes it wrap more. Now, if you don't have something like this, there are ways round it. Absolutely, there are. You can fire the light through greaseproof paper, or tracing paper, or even just paper, or kitchen roll. That will help give a softer light. It will take away some of the power of your light for sure, but it will make the light source bigger. Equally, you can bounce the light. So if you had a white wall, you could bounce the light off the white wall. The downside of that is that it doesn't give you as much control over exactly where that light's falling in terms of how you're going to shape that light. You've just got a block of light approaching. So I quite like this as a solution. You'll note I've got this as well. We're going to use this in a little bit. So let's just clear some space so that I've got some space to work. This is always the challenge, working in a small area. And I'm going to just bring this up to begin with. And it's going to be a front 3/4 light. So let me see if you can see what that looks like. Not amazingly. Let me just change this camera angle, give you a slightly better view of what's happening right there. There we go. And you can see all of the mess of lots of other lights around the back of my kitchen. Okay, so now you can see kind of a bit more of what's going on. I've put the light in behind this, so it's firing kind of straight on at this flower head. I'm actually looking at this little bulb right here. And I'm going to bring it in nice and close, because the closer I get it in, the softer the light will become, because the relatively harder it will be. So I've got the first light positioned. I think I know what it's going to look like to a degree. I'm going to make sure that my light is turned on, and let's make sure that we're in focus. There we go. And hopefully, by the wonders of the internet, not the internet, the wonders of, there we go. Oh, we've got Digital Photo Professional opening as well. So by the wonders of technology, you can see what that picture looked like. Now this is our starting point, okay? This is absolutely not our finishing point at all. This is just to begin with. Now, I don't know what your screen looks like as to how much detail you can see in that. There is actually, if I look at this, there's basically detail throughout the whole of that scene. There's nothing blocked up and black, but it does look quite dark depending on your screen. So, what do we need to do next? Well, that's our step one. We've actually got really nice light on the flower head itself, the bulb itself. But the background's very dark. And the question should probably be, why is the background so dark when we've just fired a whole load of light in here? The answer is actually very simple. If I show you this again. So I've fired light from here onto this flower bulb here, okay? And that light's traveling in this direction, which means it's not really hitting the background at all. And I've set my exposure with the flash to light this correctly, to light it how I want to light it, okay? So it's not a surprise that the background has gone dark. If I want to make the background brighter, I now need to put some light in the background as well to try and balance it up, okay? Now it could be, I might get away, possibly, with the continuous light. We'll give it a go. I've got a feeling it's not actually going to be bright enough. But if I do this, can I get any more light on that background? Let's have a little look. A little bit. Okay, so you can see that the background, some of that colour has started to come in. Okay, but it's still, I mean, it's not the nicest shot, really, is it? It's okay. It's a starting point, but it's really not that exciting. So we need to work a bit about this. Now, I'm looking at this light. I'm looking at this flower, and I'm thinking, one, I definitely want some light in the background to light that beautiful colour of the Dubai sunset. I also want the light on this flower to look a little bit different. So this front lit feeling is okay, but it's not overly exciting or interesting to me. I'm just moving some things out of the way, hoping they're not all going to fall over and make a racket. They probably will. And I'm now going to take this light. Here we go, show you what I'm doing. I'm going to take this light and I'm going to bring it round to this side. And I'm going to position it. You're not going to get a great view of this when I put it in place. But I'm going to position it in very, very close. Not too close, Dave. Very close, just here. Let me flip you to this camera. Okay, so now you can see I've put this light in nice and close. It's not actually in the shot, he says, hopefully. It's not now. It marginally was. And what we're going to get is a much more interesting looking light on here. So we've now got a backlit feel to this petal. And we should pick up some of the detail just in the tips of the leaves, or the tips of the petals, sorry. And hopefully it'll be a bit more interesting. So let's give this a quick go. And it may be that we actually, here we go, look at this. It may be that we actually want to adjust our exposure a little bit, or alternatively, we might want to put some light in from the other side. But first off, we are going to deal with this background. We're going to make that look good. So I'm going to take this other light here that I've got, and I'm going to make sure that it's set to a different setting. down here. Now, what I want to make sure of is that it doesn't fire any light, because light's going to come out of here and it's going to spray back, because light's going to basically explode out of this. So I'm going to take some tin foil. You could also use it if you have black wrap, it's very good. And I am going to wrap this, just wrap the tin foil around here like this. There we go. And position this down here, and now I should get lots of lovely light firing up onto the background here, but I'm not going to get any spill coming forwards onto the back of this flower, affecting the light that I've got there. Now, you may notice this image, as I said, is quite dark, and it's dark despite the fact that it's very bright in here, despite the fact that I do have a very big light. It's because of how I've set my exposure. So I said before that I wanted to make sure that I wanted to make sure that I didn't have any of the ambient light in the room affecting what the picture looks like. So since I'm using flash, I get complete control of everything. So I've chosen the depth of field that I want. I'm at f5.6. I don't want a lot of depth of field. I want that kind of shallow feel to the image. I've set my ISO to ISO 100 because I want to get the best image quality possible. And I've set my shutter speed to 160th of a second. And that, as you saw right at the start, meant that there was no ambient light recorded in this. It was entirely black. And hence all of the light in this scene is going to be created by me, by the flash and where I position it. So we've got that flash in the background. I'm going to turn off the front light because we know what that looks like. And I'm going to turn on the backlight. And I'm just going to take a quick test. I'm going to set the power at a guesstimate, which is going to be a 16th power. We'll just take a quick test, and I've got a horrible feeling that's going to be a bit too bright. It's actually not too bad. Look at that, we've just made a silhouette. Okay, so that was actually a pretty good guess. Right, now then, it doesn't normally happen like that. It's not normally spot on first time. That was lucky. Okay, so don't expect that to always happen to you. It rarely happens to me as well. Right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to showing you the screen so you can see the picture as it appears, but I'm also going to give you this view of me so you can kind of see me and what I'm doing as well. So we just fired the backlight. That's what I'm going to call that group B. And we didn't fire the foreground light. So we're looking at sculpting the light now. And the background light looks good. We could make it a bit darker, which may give us a bit more saturation to the colours there. But for now, I'm quite happy with that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn on the front light. And hey presto, what should happen, he says, with his fingers crossed, if I get my focus in just the right place, just there, looks quite nice. We now get a combination of the two pictures, okay? Now, as I look at that, I do think that I want that background to be a little bit darker. There's also a little bit of a flower head that's poking in behind that's slightly frustrating to me. It's not looking quite as clean. And actually, I'd quite like a bit of light on the front of this flower. As much as I love that light across the top of this petal, I think I need some light down the foreground as well. So, step one, let's deal with this in stages, because photography is incredibly logical and you can work your way through it in stages. So I'm just going to take 2 stops of light out of the background and we'll see what that looks like. And there we go. We've now got that darker, the colours starting to come through. It's much more interesting. Obviously I could move the background up to give me more of the pinky colour, but I'm quite liking that purple at the moment. So now we need to think about what we're going to do for this side of the flower head, the bulb head. So we can use reflectors, we absolutely can, but when you're working in a macro situation, reflectors can be quite big and unwieldy, and if you're in a small space, they can kind of get in the way and be a bit awkward. So how about a piece of white paper? Or I had the tin foil as well, that gives a slightly more specular result. But a little bit of white paper like this is going to allow me, if I just kind of position this in, if I show you what I'm doing here, I've taken my white paper, my white card, I'm just going to hold it in, And effectively, the light coming from here is going to fire across, it's going to hit the flower. It's then going to bounce back off the card and fire back into this front side of the flower head here. Okay, so let's go back to this. We'll see what it looks like. So now you get the combination as everything builds into one. And there you go. So now you can see how much more detail we've got. And if we look at the histogram, if I can show you the histogram in this scene. Let me come back here, and here we go. Go away. Right, if I show you the histogram here, you can see that now there's nothing white in this image. Let me get rid of me here. There's nothing white in this image, so I wouldn't expect to see anything up on the right-hand edge of the histogram. But we've got a good range of tones. Nothing is hitting the bottom left down here. In fact, let me zoom in there so that you can see that. Here we go. Nothing's hitting the bottom left-hand edge down here. Nothing's hitting the top right. We've got a lovely range of tones throughout the scene. And it matches what we would expect to see based on the colour of everything within the picture. Okay, so you've got these, all of the dark here are going to be this peak here. And then I guess most of this purpley area is going to be this peak here in the histogram. And then finally the highlight tones, which is going to be these greens and the lighter bits just here. And some of the lighter areas down the bottom of the background is going to be the right-hand edge here. So that looks like I would expect it to look, okay? And it was, sorry, just wheel myself back in place again. It was really quite simple to achieve. There are two lights there, one for the background, one for the subject, and a reflector, okay? Now let's move on. We're going to have a little look at a bigger light source, okay? And I may bring in some reflectors as well. So this easy box here, it's small, it's compact, it packs up beautifully. It gives you really lovely light. But if you want to get a more wrapping feel to your light, then you need a bigger light source. And that's what this, over here, there we go. That's what this thing over here is. It's a much bigger light source. Now there are two speed lights in there, and the front of the box is substantially bigger. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you this view while I move a few things around. Firstly, I'll wheel this out of the way. I'm going to take this. I might want this again in a little bit, so I'm just going to put it over here behind me, and I'm going to somehow attempt to maneuver this through without destroying everything. This is the biggest challenge. Oh, sorry, I appear to have just wiped it across the front of the camera. There we go. Right, I think we're there. I think we're there. Gently does it, Dave. Gently does it. Maybe make this a little bit smaller. There we go. Now this is the hard part about working in a small environment. I'm hoping I haven't just knocked my flower over. That would be disastrous. I haven't. Good. Now, what you can see is I'm now positioning this in much the same way as I did before, and I'm making sure that one, it's not in the back of the shot, and two, because I've got this lip. If you can see this lip here, I don't know if you can, you sort of can down here. Because I've got this lip, what I'm going to do, let me give you a slightly better view of that. Here we go. Here we go. Look at that. You'll see some of the cables that make all of this thing work, which is all a bit of a mess, but it's what is required. So we've got this lip, and that means it's going to help shield light from hitting the background. We're concentrating light on here, and actually I'm going to slightly change the composition of this because I want to actually shoot this vertically. Let me come over here. I want to actually shoot this in a vertical shot. I think it's going to suit the shape more, and I'm going to be able to bring in some of that foreground flower to give it a little bit of purple in the foreground. Okay, so I'm just going to flip this over. Here we go. Where are we? So I've rocked that over to the side. You'll notice that obviously, you maybe not notice, it's dropped down much lower. So I've just got to raise up the camera a little bit. So I'll just extend my tripod. There we go. Right. Now I've brought it up and I have brought it up nice and high, which has given me a bit of scope to maneuver back down and hopefully find where I want to be. Here we go. I'm just going to move my my flower a little bit. Now, you may be wondering, if I show you this view here, you may be wondering what the flower is sitting in. It's sitting in a glass. It's got some kitchen roll stuffed in there. It's got some water in there. Obviously, I want to try and keep everything looking as alive as possible. So that's all in there. Now, what I'm going to do is we are going to make use of the shallow depth of field of macro. So I'm actually going to close my aperture, open my aperture up. I'm going to shoot this really quite wide open. We're going to go to 3.2. That does mean that I'm going to get more ambient light, so I need to make my shutter speed faster as well. And hopefully that should be about right. And what I've got now, in terms of a composition, I can probably come in a little closer. There we go. Let's see if I can show you this. There we go. So if I can give you the live view of exactly what's going on here. There we go. Right, so now you'll have to kind of flip that in your head. But you see we've now got this lovely out of focus foreground. We know what the background looks like, just to be sure. I'm just going to take the picture with that background. There we go. Now I'm using manual focus here. I was using autofocus, but once you start getting in really close, autofocus, however good it is, doesn't really work very well. It starts to become a bit of a problem. So what we've got, because I've changed my settings, I need to get a bit more light into that background. So let's just try again. There we go. Right, let me bring this up. So now this is the shot that we've got, which is, it's got the light on the background, but we've got no foreground light. I've chosen my focus point. I've chosen where I want to, where exactly I want my point of focus. And when you're doing macro, this is absolutely crucial. Your exact point of focus can make or break an image. So it pays to spend the time to be very precise to do it properly. And in some cases, if you really want to, you could actually use a like a focusing rail. So let me come here and talk to you. So you could, for example, you can mount the camera on a geared rail, which allows you to slide the camera in and out ever so slightly, just tiny little movements, which if you're working at really high magnifications is really, really convenient. Around 1:1, you don't need to worry about it. Even if you're hand holding at 1:1, you can get away with doing that, particularly if you've got an image stabilized lens. But the moment you start moving into higher levels of magnification, where maybe you're at 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times magnification, it really helps to mount the camera on a geared rail, which gives you that incredibly precise and fine movement, and also keeps the camera absolutely locked down so that it doesn't move. Okay, so, Vivek says, is the flash in TTL mode? Okay, Vivek, it's a very good question. In this case, the light that's firing at the background is not. The light firing at the background is in manual. But the light that's coming from the main light source, that is in TTL mode. Now, this picture will be slightly different to the last one because there's going to be a larger area of darker tones. So it may tend towards slight overexposure, in which case I'll have to dial in some flash exposure compensation to negate that. But I'm going to take the test shot first and we're going to see. So I'll turn off the backlight. My simple rule when using lighting is always build one light at a time. If you've got 3 lights firing from 3 different angles, you have no idea what anything looks like. And actually, more than that, I always like to build from the background forwards, because then once the background's set, I can work on what everything else has to look like. But if I've got light firing on the foreground and I'm trying to work out how the background should look, I tend to find it much harder. So for me, background, work my way forwards. Get that right, then start looking at my subject and how the lighting of that's going to be. And what I did this time, what I did today when we started, was I did look at the light on the subject first to give you an idea of how light works and how you need to look at where light is coming from. But if you remember, I did then flip to let's get the background right after I'd taken a couple of example shots and then worked my way forwards with the foreground light. So, background set, let's take a quick test and see what the foreground light looks like. Here we go. Let's make sure that these are turned on and good to go. Always helps if your flash guns are turned on. That's Dave's top tip for the day. Number one, turn them on. Remember that one. Very convenient. Okay, so we're all good. We're ready to go. Let's give you the proof that there is no ambient light in here. That's exactly what I meant to do, was take a black picture so you could see there was no ambient light. I am going to, there we go. Right, so look at that. We've actually got quite a lot of light spilled onto the background, and I was kind of right. I get a feeling that for me, that's a little bit too. I think down the right-hand side of that is probably a little bit too hot for me. I need to turn that down. I think there's a little bit of overexposure. So that's now where my TTL comes in, where I can adjust my. Let's get rid of that writing. There we go. I can now adjust my TTL exposure. So I'm just going to dial in some negative flash exposure compensation. I'm actually going to bring it down a stop. In fact, with this one light source, we've actually put quite a nice picture all around. There we go. Okay, that's looking better to me. There is, yeah, I don't think there's anything overexposed on there. We've got that lovely kind of translucent green feel coming through the tips in that beautiful green area. We've got a bit of light in the background, but I think I might like a little bit more. So if we turn our backlight back on again now, and see what that does for us. And there we go. You see how the flower itself hasn't changed, but the background has now got brighter. We've got that lovely complementary purple, which picks up the purple of the foreground flower actually. And now, I think we still need a bit of light in the foreground, but as before, here, I don't want to go with putting another light in here, although I could do. What we're going to go with is our trusty piece of white paper or white card, our reflector. What you can possibly see down here, past my fridge, is that there's a couple of reflectors down there, but they would be big and unwieldy. White paper, as I said before, works perfectly. It's nice and lightweight. Everyone's got some white paper. I'm just going to bring this in, and I'm actually going to, what you should be able to see, I'm going to wrap it slightly, which is going to help bring a bit of light. As the light comes in from here, it's hopefully going to wrap round and bring light in around these petals. Rather than just coming straight back in, it's going to wrap a bit more around it because light's going to be coming from more angles. So let's see how this works. There we go, we'll bring that in. And there you go. We now have those shadows in the foreground lifted. We've got that lovely shape down the bottom of the bulb. Really, really nice. And we've created, from a quite simple start point, a very pleasing looking picture, just of a rose head. I say rose, my flower identification is really not that great. I'm not entirely convinced that's a rose. Any botanists out there want to tell me what that is? I'm all ears. I'd love to know. Okay, so you can see how easy that was. Yeah, we didn't have a lot of challenges. We've used two light sources, and we have used a reflector. I used a printed background to create a lovely colour background. Obviously, I could replace that out now. If I wanted to make that look entirely different, I could put a different background in there. I could go with that vibrant blue, kind of, or blue, I say blue, but kind of tealy, greeny blue. That could work quite nicely. It would be very quick to switch this out and create lots of different looks. For me though, right now, I'm quite happy with that. I think that's got a lovely feel to it. I think the exposure looks really good. It's sharp right where I want it to be. I quite like that purple in the foreground. Yeah, I think it's an okay position to be in. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to take this lens and we're going to look at getting in closer still. So I said I wanted to show you, if I can reach for them, I wanted to show you these guys. I want to show you what they do. So these are extension tubes, as I said at the start. They have no optics in them. They are quite simply tubes to move the lens further away from the camera body so you can get that closer focus. So I'm just going to turn off the camera and we'll see what happens. So actually, to make this as viable or interesting as possible, I'm going to choose a different flower. We're going to get in as close as I possibly can with this lens so that you can see exactly what it does. Keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. Somewhere about here. Right, let's bring this down. And we're going to find, that's quite nice. We'll find a slightly more interesting, oh, where are you? I think about here. Right, lovely. Okay, well done. Let's get another piece. Right, so I'll just take this picture. Now, you can't see what I've done, but I've moved the flower in closer. I'm now at the minimum focus distance of this lens. I'm shooting almost wide open, so my depth of field is tiny. I know that the camera is likely to overexpose this, so I've turned the flash down a little bit more. And I'm going to put the reflector in, and basically what I want to show you is what this lens does on its own. So there we go. Let's have a little look at that. There we go. Okay, so we've got that lovely soft feel. And now, if I put this down here, I'll show you what's going on. So I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm simply going to, so you know there's no trickery going on. I take the lens off. I'm going to replace it with an extension tube. And this is a 25mm extension tube. And I'm going to put it back on the camera. And hopefully, by the wonders of modern technology, my EOS utility, which is my remote capture software, is going to start again. He says, he crosses his fingers in hope. No, I don't want Digital Photo Professional, thank you. I would like EOS Utility 3. And here we go. Right, remote shooting, live view shoot. Right, let's give you this now. So, well, it's out of focus for a start. We're at the minimum. Let's zoom right in. Here we go. Now, I've put this on. I can now get even closer to my subject. So, oh, now there's a rather nice fold just there. I quite like the look of. That's a fraction too close. You see, I'm having to move the flower. I don't know if you can see this. I'm having to move the flower tiny, tiny amounts. And it is, it's then moving, which is quite frustrating, as in the flower's then shaking. When you've got the camera on rails, it does make things an awful lot easier. Right, so I think we're pretty good. I don't know how that's looking to you sideways on, but we'll see what it looks like. Let's actually change that composition slightly. I want that to be, let's just bring that across a little. There we go. No, a little bit more, Dave. Yeah. About there. There we go. Right. So, setup, I'm going to use exactly the same lighting because I really rather liked the light coming in from that side. Just make sure that focus is right where I want it to be. It's just got to be right on that fold of the petal. We're going to use our trusty piece of white card again. And Here we go. Now there you go. So just by setting the extension tube, you can see how much closer in I was able to get to that petal. Now that was the 25mm extension tube. Now for extra, come back here, for extra fun, because photography should always be fun, right? For extra fun, I'm now going to take this, and this is what people get confused with. They think that extension tubes and extenders are the same thing. Well, I showed you that extension tubes have no optics in them. An extender, I'm not going to put my finger through this, otherwise I'll have to clean it. These have a lens in them. They have optics in them, and I don't know if you can kind of see that. There you go. It has glass. It's not just air. Okay. Now, in theory, I can't use this extender on this lens because this bit that sticks out here would stick into the back of the lens. One of the things I love in photography is experimenting, trying different things out and finding out what works. So what I'm going to turn the camera off again. And now that I've got the extension tube in place, if I take this off here and show you, because the extension tube is here on the back of the lens, I can now stick an extender in here. Now, I'm showing you this with Canon, but it doesn't really matter what system you're using. There are extension tubes and there are extenders and there are macro lenses for most systems out there. Okay, so this is eminently possible. What you may find in your system, then you'll achieve the same effect, basically. Let's put this one in and let's give you this view. I can't give you the other view because unfortunately there's a lot of light in the way now. And what I should find now, hopefully, is that I now have, well, one, I'm much closer to the flower. I'm going to let my EOS utility reopen again. Let's do that. There we go. Come on, EOS utility. Thank you very much. Okay. Remote shooting, live view shooting, and I'll give you this view. Now, if you wanted to create a background, a lovely purple background, this would probably not be a bad start, would it? That would work quite nicely. Now, let's see. Because I've put an extender on there, I probably need to move the camera further back because I'm getting much more magnification. Now this is when it gets really quite interesting because the tiniest movements make massive differences, and you really need to spend time looking at your subject and figuring out exactly what it is that you want to focus on. Now, what you should remember we talked about depth of field, and where are we? Somewhere about there. I told you that depth of field is controlled by how near or far you are from your subject. Well, this is kind of the proof. We're in very, very close. We've got our aperture fairly wide open. We're shooting with an incredibly shallow depth of field. And my focus is remarkably challenging. So this is the shot that I'm looking at. I'm going to keep the same lighting, but then just before we wrap up, I am going to change the lighting. I think that's quite nice. Now we're going to get, you see we've got the front of the petal here, that lovely detail. It's a massive amount of magnification. So I actually worked this out. This is somewhere around 2.5 times to 1. So I put this back in because I want to get some light actually underneath that petal. I'm going to wait for it to stop bouncing. Yeah, so we're now starting to struggle with how much light we can realistically get out of these lights. So what I'm going to do, we're actually just going to have a quick look and see, because we've changed the light that we've got in here, I'm going to have a quick look and see what we can do to adjust our exposure and thereby find out where we need to go. So that was a shutter speed of 500th of a second, which is frankly ridiculous. I didn't need all of that. That's making the flash work really very hard. I can actually get away with, if I come back here, I can get away with somewhere in the, well, kind of 30th of a second, okay, which is going to make my flash have a much easier job of it. Okay, so let's come back here. I think we were working very much on the limits of what was possible with flash then. So there we go. That's looking quite a bit better. There we go. It's nice and subtle. It's dark and moody. It's a really lovely, interesting looking shot. I think we could do better though. I think we've got a bit more scope for improvement. I love the light that's falling underneath that petal. I think it's interesting, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and actually change the shape of this light. So let me give you, here we go, you can see what I'm up to. I'm going to bring this light up and in, and I'm going to fire it a little bit more from above. And I'm going to try and do this again without knocking out my flower. So here we go, let's lift it up. There we go. Now this light is much more of a top light, which I actually think is going to really quite suit the shape of this flower. Here we go, let's keep coming down, coming down, coming down, coming down. We can come in really quite close with this because we're only seeing that flower. We're not seeing any of the background at all. So it doesn't really matter about that. And now, as you can see, we have got, well, the flower is actually very, very close to that, or the light's very close to that flower. And I'm going to put the reflector back in here, which is going to help a little bit of light. In fact, I'm not going to bother because what you can hopefully see is that I've got white paper here. So as the light comes out of here, it's going to hit this anyway, and there's going to be some fill light come back up. So we'll start with that and see how we get on. And this is the thing about macro photography. You can play with light all day. You can find tiny little micro compositions within your subject all day long and create some really lovely, interesting looking pictures. Now, let me just check my focus hasn't moved. It has not, so let's give that a go. There we go. Now, I think the shape of that lighting is a little bit nicer. Rather than in from the side, here we go, let's show you what that looks like. Rather than the light coming in from the side, we've created a slightly higher looking light, looking down into the flower. It's given it a bit of a more interesting shape to it. I think I'd quite like some light in that bottom right-hand corner. I think that might be, it's not actually too dark, but I still think I'd like it to be a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to take my piece of white paper, and I'm going to put it in here. And that's hopefully going to spill a bit of light back into the other corner. So I'll give you the view so you can see it. Here we go. There you go. You see how that's just lifted the light underneath. It's lifted that shadow area. It's made it not quite so deep and dark, but given it that little bit more depth and texture to it. Now, as I say, we could spend all day playing with this. I think I've actually just spotted potentially another little composition in here. What we're looking for is obviously, we are looking for light and shadow. We're looking for shapes, and we can spend a lot of time looking for interesting textures, and it's like a never-ending quest of finding interesting looking pictures in a macro environment. So I've just moved this ever so slightly because I just saw something that I thought may work, and I'll take this one and then we shall wrap up. Right, I'm just positioning things, just making sure everything is set up. If you have any more questions, guys, feel free to fire away, otherwise you're going to miss your opportunity. Right, okay, so we're pretty much there. Let's just get it focused. And, oh, it's so close. It's so close. There we go. I think that's going to do it. Right. So what we've got now, don't throw away the compositional rules. Remember remember all your compositional rules. Remember what you're trying to achieve in looking for shape and flow. I'm going to give you the picture now as I take it, so you can see what we've got. There we go. And now all I've done, as you can see, I've just moved slightly further into the flower. You've got that crisscrossing of the petals. I think I could probably do with brightening that up maybe just a little bit, but it is quite a dark, rich purple colour. So I'm expecting those tones to be quite dark. Maybe I'd like a little bit more light in that front corner. But that's simply a case of playing around with the reflector and making sure that I get the light where I need it to be. Right. So, macro photography with flowers. That's everything I'm going to cover today. We've run our course. We've run our 1 hour. So it is time for me to wrap up and say thank you very much for watching. Apologies once more for the hiccup at the beginning where my internet just evaporated. But that's exactly why I run 2 lines, so I could switch over and get back up and running again. And hopefully it didn't detract or distract you too much, detract from your enjoyment of the session or your learning, or indeed distract you too much. I will be back again next week, same time, hopefully with no internet gremlins. And I will be doing, oh, it's a very good question. I'm not sure what I'm doing next week. It's either going to be water drops. I think it's water drops. I think I'm doing water drops next week. So next week will be a lot more macro-y stuff. We'll be using macro lenses as well, but we'll be looking at how to capture some of those water drop pictures, but without going to the expense of buying lots of specialist water drop making kit. So I'll be demonstrating how you can build a simple water drop kit, how you can use light and backgrounds and flashlights to create beautiful water drop pictures right in your own home. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. For those of you that ask questions, oh, there's a question just come in. Sanjay, you've just got in before I've wrapped up. Instead of macro or macro rings and extender, have I tried a Raynox 250? I have to say, honestly, I haven't. I have not tried a Raynox 250 on 100mm. It's something I'll have to go and have a look into. Do you have a particular question around it that you wanted to know? If so, I'll give you 30 seconds to ask the question. If not, feel free to message me directly. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram and send me a message directly and we can talk about it there and then. So I am going to wrap up now. Mad Gaming Scientist, thanks a lot. Everybody, thank you so much for joining. For those of you that asked questions, for those of you that sat through the whole thing, thank you one and all. I hope you enjoyed it and I look forward to seeing you all same time next week. Stay safe and well, everybody. Keep shooting and bye-bye for now.